We're live.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to House Government Operations and Military Affairs. Today is April 1st, and we are picking up work on S-59, an act relating to amendments to Vermont's open meeting law. We touched on this a little bit last week, and something the Senate colleagues sent over to us, and we're just kind of continuing hearing from folks. And this is a piece that we have flagged as something we want to spend time on and move. So we're happy to hear from everyone, starting with Samantha Shi.
Hello.
How are you? It's been like a week.
A week. I'm good. I just need to
Take your time.
get into the Zoom. Waiting for Autumn to stop it. Okay, well, I get this pulled up. For the record, I am Samantha Sheehan, the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and am happy to be here today. Sorry, I'm definitely muted. Okay, maybe I'll not screen share. And it's posted. Okay. Sorry, my mic was muted. I don't know how that's even possible. Okay, great. So I'll just guide you through the posted PowerPoint. So as a reminder, VLCT represents all 247 municipal governments in the state of Vermont. One of the direct services that we provide local officials is confidential, qualified legal advice from our team of experienced municipal attorneys. We call them MAC, Municipal Assistance Center. As open meeting law was revised in the last biennium and the new law took effect, our team at MAC and our municipal operations team assisted many, many towns in coming into compliance with the new requirements of the law. In doing that, they fielded questions from various public bodies in communities across Vermont and did occasionally encounter questions from municipal officials where the guidance for them was not clear, either because the law may self-conflict or conflict with another area of law, such as public records or criminal code, or just sort of lack of clarity in interpretation. So back when I came to meet you in the opening days of this session, we provided a memo with a list of technical changes that have been collected by the MAC attorneys over time, and that we were requesting legislative action to address, much like the elections changes that we requested. And want to thank you again for including in the miscellaneous elections bill this year. So we did go speak with your colleagues in the Senate. They included several of those requests, but not all of them. So we're here today to ask for some additional amendment or action from you on S-59 to some sort of remaining concerns that we have with the law. So if you go to the first white slide, slide number 3, the first item is we request that the requirement to post a recorded meeting. Currently, the law says that the public body has to designate some place to post a recorded meeting. We would like it to be clarified to say on a platform controlled that is maintained by that public body if one exists. So basically, I live in Hancock. If the town of Hancock has a website, which we do, that the town would designate the town website as the place where the recorded materials are posted, and not a third-party website. The concern is that third-party hosts, whether that be like Zoom, YouTube, public access television, freeconferencecall.com, Google folder, cannot be compelled to comply with public records law or other requirements of open meeting law, such as the timeline for required posting of a recording. And those records would not be in control of the government unit, as Tucker says, in perpetuity, the way that physical records are that are maintained within a town facility. Was there a question about that?
I did see Representative Waters.
Thank you. Would this include things like Media Factory and like, that record and broadcast and live stream the public meetings?
Yeah, and those are really great partners. Those local action or I'm forgetting the correct acronym, but those service providers, public access service providers are really critical partners to many municipalities across the state in creating this access to sort of remote viewing. And we think this change would not preclude those partnerships from continuing, but would require that the records be also maintained on a designated digital site that is within the control of the government.
Right. Do you have any, should I wait and say my question?
Oh, yeah, no, you
I was just gonna ask about the
Fire away.
cost of it. Because it seems like there are varying abilities for towns. Maybe they have a really rudimentary website that's not capable of hosting like video or something like that. And I'm wondering about like how municipalities can bear the costs of these.
I don't have an idea of sort of the range of costs
Yeah.
for managing this new type of public record that we're requiring be kept. However, this was certainly a concern raised by VLCT in last year's conversations that the sort of technology, including the software and record storage cost, like that this law in effect creates a new ongoing operational expense for municipal government. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of recordings, a lot of data to host. But we're not sort of reopening that policy discussion. We think with this request, we're just asking for it to be clear that those records are stored on a digital property that is maintained by the public body if one exists. And not a third party that may go out of business, may change their, client service agreements in regards to how much of the prior materials are available in the future. Whereas if it's on the town website or a digital property that's maintained by the municipality, then that's within the control of the public body.
Rep Hango, and then Rep-
I just had one more question.
Sure,
Okay,
yeah.
so in this instance, just to clarify, you're saying if I'm from Charlotte and we have a website and there's all kinds of stuff on it. So you're saying the town of Charlotte, if there's a recording of a select board meeting, it needs to be, are you saying that it needs to be posted there, even if it's posted somewhere else like the Media Factory? Or are you saying that the town just needs to maintain those recordings so it could supply information needed for a public records request if one was issued?
I'm really saying both, like we think the change we're requesting would not stop that relationship and posting from a third party from continuing. Those are good relationships that provide important access to the community. The concern is that in the future, so say public access television station X that serves community Y makes a change that they don't want to pay YouTube the monthly amount that they're paying, we're going to remove all records from before 2019. And we're only going to host public meetings on our platform from 2019 forward. What happens to those records? That's not how towns maintain records. That's not how government maintains records. We maintain records in perpetuity.
Right.
And if someone requests to the town, a member of the public makes a public records request, I want to see all of the planning commission meetings for town Y on the approval of this specific land use permit. How can the town facilitate its requirements and obligations under public records law if those records are maintained by a non-governmental entity and potentially no longer available? They've changed their sort of own record management policy that the town doesn't have control over. So that's the concern. But these are good partnerships and a really important public service that is provided by these community media groups for sure.
I guess my question was, is it about maintaining a record somewhere, just keeping them on a thumb drive in the town clerk's office? Or like, would that be sufficient to preserve that material? Or you really think like posting it is the,
We think both are important.
okay.
Yeah. Like these, we have to post notice of where everything happens in local government. We think it should be consistent with the posting of the recorded meetings as well.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'm going to hold off and make suggestions when we actually walk through the bill.
Rep. Kissel.
So I just went on to our website. And if you go to my town's website.
Mhm.
And you can go to the select board and see all the minutes, and then there's a link to our local GNAT television that does the recording, and then you can see all of our minutes, our meetings on there. That's not good enough. You want it, is that okay? Because that's third party, or you want it in our town?
I think in what we're sort of conceptualizing, that could continue and the town would store a,
So you want the town to also store it someplace else?
Yeah.
Okay.
so that if GNAT just made a change to how they are choosing to manage access to their media online in the future, which would be,
Okay.
within their ability to do, that those things don't disappear.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the
Marcel?
secondary storage site doesn't have to be public. It just has to be backed up somewhere. Like you don't have to double link things. You could put GMAT, but then
Yeah, I
just say
don't think
like,
so, yeah.
put a disclaimer at the bottom, like you can also contact blah, blah, blah if you want.
The problem is, the problem is that this directive to municipal government does not exist in the law. And so there are municipalities that are just making an open link to the Zoom recording that you can pull down from Zoom. But what if Zoom changes its data service agreement with the municipality and just like deletes those files? That's what we're concerned about happening. Because the municipalities are not producing the recording and they're not, and in many cases, they're not storing or providing the public access for the viewing or the downloading of the material. That's all being done through a third party. Thank you. I really appreciate all these questions. I didn't get as many before. So we'll stay, this other thing we're asking for doesn't have to be done in open meeting law, but we thought, well, while we're here, let's ask for this too. This is an ongoing area of concern for many very small rural communities. I live in a community like this where we don't have 3 public buildings. So for public meetings, the municipality is required to post, to designate at the opening of the sort of legislative year for that body, 3 public places to post meeting notices. And in towns that don't have 3 public buildings, weird things are happening, such as a sandwich board next to town hall where the notice is on the sandwich board as well as on the town hall, which I think sort of defeats the intent of the requirement. And so we suggest making it possible for towns that don't have 3 public buildings, where they can post in a neighboring town's public building where the community members are known to frequent. And also that they could designate, again, their town website as a place for posted meeting materials. It's also just consistent with sort of the new reality of hybrid meetings happening under the revised open meeting law. So we have 2 separate sort of concerns with how public bodies manage elements of public safety and security for open meetings now with the changes in place. One is a request to add an executive session exemption for the discussion of cybersecurity. And this was a typo that I meant to remove. Not cybersecurity and public safety. Public safety policy should be discussed in open meeting. But cybersecurity and safety questions around the access of the meeting should be done in executive session. And then second, this may sound far-fetched, but it's not. I got a bunch of emails about this today about an incident that just happened in a Vermont municipality this week. It happens that members of the public will quote Zoom bomb or share explicit material during a recorded hybrid meeting.
Happens.
And then, unlike in various components of public records law, there is no exemption under open meeting law for the town to remove that explicit content before they are required to post it to the public. Not only is that something a lot of town officials just don't want to do, it's also something that puts them in conflict with a part of Vermont criminal code, which says it is illegal to store and make available nudity and sexual content in a place where a minor could access it. I think arguably the school board website or the town website is a place where a minor could access that material. So our suggestion to sort of remedy this would be to allow the redaction with citation, just like we do on public records. So there would be a citation on the recording, like redacted pursuant to new subsection of open meeting law. And the town has to retain the entire unredacted recording so that if someone did want to confirm that other parts of the meeting were not removed, they could request the whole meeting recording and they could confirm that for themselves, a member of the public who's an adult. Okay. Now I admit I will concede to you. This next request is more a policy decision and less a technical change. But I will say that there have been complaints that have escalated to lawsuits related to the sort of lack of this particular exemption, or rather confusion about the application of the law on advisory bodies. Members of a public body meeting to do advisory deliberative work. This is commonly referred to in communities across the state as a quote working group. So not an official standing subcommittee of a public body, but some collection of town officials meeting to do time limited advisory work, such as research, community outreach, or policy development that is limited in scope. So not like a standing subcommittee for the budget process of a town, but something like, well, let's do this one. This is my example. So if you go to slide 6, So I create a sort of hypothetical comparison to show you how, because many towns in Vermont have a lower capacity, they have smaller legislative bodies and a lack of municipal staff, they are sort of experiencing an unequal application of open meeting law. So in this hypothetical, we have city A and town B. Both of these communities want to brainstorm ideas for how to support outdoor recreation activities amongst their municipal legal trail network. In city A's city government, they have a town manager form of government, an 8-person city council, a director of parks and recreation who's a municipal staff member. They have an advisory citizen commission for parks and rec. So these would be volunteers who are appointed by the council. And then a 3-person standing subcommittee of the council to discuss budget questions. Town B has a 3-person select board, no municipal staff. There is a standing subcommittee of the select board, and there's a volunteer body, a town pride club, that is not a group of town officials elected or appointed, just local volunteers who organize activations in the community. I won't read out the grid, but you can take a look at that. And I show in this hypothetical, city A could have 4 public officials meeting together to discuss a topic. And they have not triggered open meeting law. They are not a public meeting by having this discussion. Whereas in town B's hypothetical example, 2 town officials meet to cover the same deliberative content, and they have triggered open meeting law. And so we argue to you that volunteers who serve in elected and appointed positions at the town level and who do the essential work of local government across Vermont really need to be able to do deliberative advisory work outside of the sort of burdens of process that have been created by open meeting law. Just the way municipal staff get to do that where they exist in communities. But in communities without staff, they can very quickly trigger accidentally a public meeting. And then if you go to the last slide, these are some of the things we requested, which are in the memo we sent to you, I resent today, that the Senate did choose to amend into S59 as introduced, and we're thankful for that. Although I will highlight that a question for Legislative Council is if the exemption for site visits would apply to municipal public bodies or not. We would like it to apply to municipal public bodies. The reason quickly is that a municipality cannot make a public meeting at a private property, but sometimes has to go to private property to conduct the business of the, like a BCA, yeah, exactly. And that's all I had.
Any questions on that second slug of testimony from Samantha? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This will be the last time we're talking about this one with you. So thank you for your time. See, Cassie won this. I'm sorry if I.
No.
All right.
For the record, Cassie Polimas, CEO of Vita. Thank you for inviting me here today. This is a committee that I have not spent any time with before. So I want to say thank you. I actually really appreciate the size of this room. It's much larger than most of the other.
So do we.
Yeah. So I'll keep my remarks fairly brief, but I do want to make sure that I start off with letting you know who or what VITA is. I did share our most recent annual report. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary. So read that at your pleasure tonight to help you fall asleep. It will give you some nice information on the work that we do and some stories from our borrowers. And that's really the heart of what we do. So VITA is an instrumentality, just like VHFA, VSAC, the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. We're all instrumentalities created under state statute. In our case, what VITA does is provide loans to businesses, including agricultural businesses and forestry businesses. So we are very much like a bank, except that we don't have deposits. We fund ourselves by our interest earned on the loans that we make, as well as borrowing from other financial institutions. So we're not reliant on the state for appropriations to fund our operating expenses. We are self-funded. We, as a financial institution, as you can imagine, deal with confidential information all the time. That's what we do. And confidentiality is at the heart of VITA, and it's at the heart of earning the trust of borrowers throughout the state. At the same time, we are also very much in favor of full transparency and access to what VITA does. And I spend a lot of my time going around and sharing what VITA does and who we are. And even if you look in the financial report, you can see we provide a list of all the borrowers that we made loans to the past year. So it's very open from that standpoint. However, the process of credit underwriting, loan decisioning, that is not subject to public access. And so we have a loan committee of our board members that meets twice a month. And the only agenda item on that loan committee meeting is to consider loan applications. So what we have right now under the proposed, in place, new open meeting laws is for our loan committee meetings, we open the meeting, approve the minutes, immediately go into executive session, discuss the loans, come out of the meeting, vote on approving the loans in open, public meeting, and then adjourn. There's no additional public value added by making that a hybrid meeting. It just adds to the layers of work and resources that we have to put in place to actually make that a hybrid meeting. And one of the things that it potentially does is compromise that confidentiality. So we have had a few meetings where it looks like somebody that we don't know is actually attending the meeting. So we have to stop the meeting, potentially disconnect everybody and start back up again. So my request is a simple one, to exempt meetings where the only items to be discussed fall into executive session. I could make other, requests. I don't, for instance, the advisory body definition doesn't really fit VITA. We have budgetary matters, but those budgetary matters are not tax dollars. Those are VITA dollars. So we're one of those that kind of got scooped into this as an instrumentality. And again, as I say, fully support transparency and access to everybody. But at the same time, if there's a compromise, the confidentiality and trust as a financial institution that that's creating, I advocate that we take care of that and mitigate that risk, because that risk would far override any benefit to the public of making these meetings hybrid.
Representative Hoover Burlington.
Hi.
So when you do your minutes, do they basically reflect? Here are the minutes. We approve the minutes. They don't
The
have
minutes-
anything in them.
No, the minutes do, if say a transaction, a loan application is approved,
Is it identical?
it's identified in the minutes. It only becomes public record once it's approved by the board.
So the name is associated with it.
Yeah. And those minutes are obviously posted in accordance with the requirements.
Rep Hango, then Waters up.
Is the outcome of the vote in your minutes as well?
Yes,
So we voted 4-3
Yep.
to approve
Yep.
such and such individual. And if that individual is denied, that doesn't become public record or?
correct. Does not. It's only public record if it's approved. Applications to the authority are not public. It's just an application.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear, you're asking to be exempt from the hybrid portion where you're electronic, where there's a.
Right.
Streaming.
Only for meetings that are just executive session, which maybe we're alone in this case, but we have a lot of them.
Yeah, and then you would be posting the location and time of those meetings just as usual?
Right. Yeah.
And what do you mean by compromise? Like how would it become compromised by offering the hybrid option?
Well, just as you heard earlier that, Zoom bombing or people that somehow figure out how to get into that meeting, but you can't see them, they're there. And the more we improve our technology, just sort of on a macro level, there's always going to be another new way of figuring out hacking. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Right, and one more question. So I know you said you're self-funded, but are you spending or just loaning out public money of any kind or?
Generally, no. So here's the tie to the state. We borrow from other financial institutions, larger banks, and then we relend that money. In order for us to get favorable interest rates on that borrowing, Vida's borrowing, the state provides moral obligation to back up our credit with the larger lenders. So it's indirect. There's moral obligation of the state. The state treasurer is on our board.
Okay,
And that enables Vida to access capital that we would not otherwise be able to get at the kinds of terms that we can get it.
thank you.
You have questions? All right,
Right? Thank you. so
appreciate it.
much.
Yeah. All right, next up on the screen, John Porter.
Oh, hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Chair Barong, members of the committee, my name's John Potter. I'm the town manager in Brattleboro. Thanks for hearing from me today. I also have a hybrid issue, I guess. Brattleboro has a unique representative town meeting form of government where people are elected to represent others in their districts. And this was originally done, at least in part, so that the town meeting could fit in the largest space we have available, the Brattleboro High School gym. Last biennium, when the open meeting law was updated, it included Brattleboro's representative town meeting in the definition of a public body. This isn't an issue for many of the requirements of public bodies. These representative town meetings are open to the public. They're televised live and archived online. But the new requirements that all public bodies provide a hybrid electronic meeting platform just doesn't work for a town meeting. That's why you don't see hybrid electronic town meetings in towns across the state. running a hybrid version of this meeting for a representative town meeting presents really significant logistical hurdles for our town. The expense of setting up such a system in a large auditorium, delays in vote tallying, lost time switching between platforms, questions on keeping a quorum, really serious challenges around maintaining attendance and integrity of the debate. So Brattleboro needs a solution. We're asking for a solution, and we're asking you to consider exempting representative town meetings from their status as a public body, subject to this hybrid requirement. This could be done by adding an exemption to the definition of public body in section 310, subsection 6. Without this clarification, it really creates unnecessary confusion and an unfunded mandate that's pretty unworkable for our town. So I urge you to add this to your deliberation. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So what is, I guess I'm a little curious. You were talking about just sort of the expense and the logistics, right? So you're the only municipality that does it this way, if I'm correct, right?
That's
In the
right.
state. So what are you looking at as sort of a financial cost, requirement, burden within the structure of this? What is it?
I think it's going to be in the tens of thousands of dollars to set it up for the kind of space that we have so that everyone could be participating and seeing, who's speaking and so on and so forth. The really big challenge is trying to switch between, like when we have people voting on a measure, it's very difficult to see in the room. Like basically every vote would have to be done on practically a roll call basis in order to integrate the hybrid platform into a body of 136 members who are mostly sitting in the room.
Did you offer testimony within this context with Senate government operations?
Yes, I did. In fact, this exemption was in the original version of S59, and they removed this exemption from subsection 6. The Senate committee suggested that two things. They suggested that we set up a bank of telephones so that people could phone into the meeting. That seemed very unwieldy to us. Like, how would we do that, and who would manage it? We'd have to find somebody to manage between the moderator and phone calls coming in to participate. The second suggestion that they had was that our representative town meeting drive up to Montpelier and use the House's space to conduct a hybrid meeting there. That also seemed burdensome on our 136 members to have to drive up and back just to hold their town meeting. That's why we're asking for the exemption under the definition of public bodies.
I see Pisnall, then Hooper of Burlington.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in our miscellaneous election bill, in my section that I read on the floor, section 29, we added a subcategory E defining the word meeting. Meeting does not mean a gathering of the voters of a municipality for purposes of conducting an annual or special municipal meeting. So wouldn't that exempt them?
Gentleman has his hand up. Maybe you can speak to that person.
Chair Rowling, so I do think that's right, Representative. However, because the representative town meeting members are elected, they were not included in that exemption. So they qualify under the definition of public body. Although there is some confusion on that, that's how our town attorney sees it. So that's why we're asking for this exemption on the definition.
Representative Hooper of Burlington, then Stone of Burlington.
Hi. So your 136 people are generally in the room and they are the ones that are interacting with the chair and conducting the business. So the only thing that anybody else that isn't in the room or that is in the room needs to see is what's happening. You don't have to have interaction, anything like that, so you seems like a pretty large Zoom potentially, but not great cost.
And I understand where he's coming from, but that's something, you know, we're gonna have to talk to council and
Yeah.
understand that one a lot more in depth. As to the ripple effects that could occur with a exemption like that. Anything else to add, Mr. Farr?
Yeah, there is already an exception in that definition for councils. We're hoping that you could add our singular representative town meeting to this so that our town meetings in Brattleboro can function like all the other town meetings across the state in terms of hybrid meeting requirements.
No, I mean, I appreciate where you're coming from on that. So that is, you know, we'll take further testimony on that, confer with council, and see what language looks like. But I appreciate you putting that in front of us.
Great, same. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
And I do not see the Secretary of State's office in here. Oh, hey, over there.
Hi, I am Jenny Prosser. I am the Secretary of State's General Counsel and also Director of Municipal Assistance. This is my first time in this physical room.
Hey, no wonder I didn't recognize you.
So I have been with the Secretary of State's office for about 10 years now. And in that capacity, a large part of my day is spent answering inquiries from folks who have questions about municipal law and open governance. We're at roughly 1,500, sometimes up to 1,800 a year. That's just me, not including the questions that our records folks takes and our elections folks takes. So we hear from local officials, we hear from members of the public, about 50-50. So we often come before committee as a representative of members of the public because we don't think that they necessarily get the representation here that would be ideal for them. And like I said, about half the calls we get come from folks who are concerned about how their government is doing work at the local level. So we generally support this bill. We're glad to see a lot of clarifications in here. We get a lot of calls about some of the language that's being addressed in this bill. Undue hardship, picking out that non-advisory body term that really stresses out a lot of people. So we love a lot of what we see here. We had a couple of small nuancy suggestions. One is that this new language as passed by the Senate excludes site inspections and field visits of state public bodies from otherwise applicable hybrid requirements and recording and posting requirements. And yes, we encourage you to think a bit about a way to maybe restrict that or make it more clear to avoid a situation where field visit is considered to be an expansive, anytime we go off site, we can meet and not be hybrid. Some language that I've seen proposed in actually the league's materials that I thought was good at one point was, you know, limiting it to statutory or limiting it to quasi judicial proceedings. I don't know if that's, I don't want to speak for them. I don't want to misstate that, but I think maybe making clear that public bodies can't take testimony, can't admit evidence, or can't make decisions out there in the field if they're not going to be doing this in a hybrid way. And I do understand in the field, it is nearly impossible for it to be in somebody's house and you're looking at their base for tax purposes and you're, you know, to just stream that or to have that be a hybrid situation is not really workable in a lot of ways. And there's also the legal reasons why it might be not a great idea. But I think tailoring it a bit might be the way to go in order to really make sure that we're still making these meetings as accessible as possible, making sure that conversations aren't happening out in the field that ought to be happening in the context of a hybrid meeting. And I also want to say that we support the league's suggestion that this also extend to municipalities as well, not just state public bodies. When I read this, it's not entirely clear to me, but I think that it reads as only an option or only an exclusion for state public bodies and not for municipal ones. So that's one. The other small piece we had in here was the requirement for posting electronic recordings of meetings for municipalities. Removed some terms that were not generally applicable. That's great, the approval of the official language. For clarity, we suggest also adding or specifying a deadline by which the recordings must be either posted or made available, similar to what is in the law now for minutes. We just get a lot of calls saying, how soon do they have to put it up? How soon do we have to put it up? And there's a timeline in there for how long it has to stay up, but there's no time frame within which it has to go up except for after minutes are up. And that could be quite a bit out a ways. And I realize that for some local bodies, there is that balance. You're trying to make it workable because they're only meeting once a month or, every other week. But I think to have something in there that's a little bit more concrete guidance would be helpful. And I think otherwise, we get a lot of calls about mechanics of executive session, about what agenda content should look like. We really like ideas broadly of having more specifics in the law so we have more to share. And I should mention that while we give a lot of guidance to towns and members of the public in a traditional sort of way, but not in a statutory sort of way, we now do have this new obligation to produce trainings for town officials and state officials on the open meeting law. And so I think folks are expecting a bit more from us. We give general information, we give education, we can't give legal advice, but the more that we have to go on in statute, the more we can share with them, the easier it is for us to explain what their obligations and rights are.
Any questions?
I have always been, as town clerk and chair of my BCA, I've always treated site visits for home inspections when it comes to appraisals as quasi judicial, in that we don't take any testimony, we don't admit any evidence in front of the homeowner, we don't make any decisions there until we get back to the meeting. So I would hope that whatever we decide that we do include municipalities when it comes to site visits. I always thought it was there, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, if you don't have a quorum, so with the site visits, you might only have 3 folks there and it might not be a quorum anyway.
Not
But
in my body, but if some
Right,
other
right.
towns, it might be a quorum.
right. And yes, I think you are correct. I think the concern here would be is if we are looking at something broader than just a quasi judicial situation, then there could be discussions that are building towards consensus in some sort of way. And that ought to be occurring not on the turf of a site visit outside of the hybrid obligation. So some of this recommendation here might be belt and suspenders for some groups sometimes. And I think, we're open to how this is done. We would like to see it tidied or tailored a bit more.
No, I totally understand. what you're
Yeah.
asking. Like, just refine the language so there's more clarity, especially since you're offering trainings and guidance to set the table for what they're doing within that landscape, not to use too many euphemisms, but yeah. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, of course, I'm guessing this is not the last time we're gonna have you folks in on this one and more. All right. Mr. Coda.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Matt Coda. My firm is Meadow Hill, and I'm here representing Vermont Communications Union Districts Association. Speaking about the open meeting law. Just as a way of background, I care deeply about open meeting law. I'm a former journalist. I was a planning commissioner in Plainfield, was the chair of Development Review Board in South Burlington, and a city councilor. We have a different, on behalf of CUDs, have a different sentiment regarding this rule, which is we are born of COVID. We know nothing but online meetings. And starting in January of this year, the requirement in the law passed last year was that we have an in-person location. In-person location for a municipality, a CUD, is 2 or more towns that work together to ensure that we have access to world-class broadband throughout those territories, those municipalities. They have no offices. Many have no staff. And they have complied with the law in those cases, warned that they've opened up a town hall or a library and let people know, but no one attend. It is a burden, what we might call an undue hardship. And this could simply be a clarification that in fact, the words undue hardship in the law qualify for a CUD. For example, NEKCV. In the southwestern corner is Roxbury. In the northeastern corner is Canaan. That's about a 2.5-hour drive from one end of the territory to the other. Where would you hold that one meeting? What volunteer would you post to sit alone in a building which you have to publicly warn, not attend? In my experience, I was the chair of the South Burlington Development Review Board during COVID, and there was pushback to having online meetings. And as Representative Nugent might remember, I was very pro online meetings. I found it a very an opportunity for more people to attend. I think they work. I think they work well. But the problem is having a hybrid meeting in districts that are so large and so vast. I think it's more important that these, at least from our perspective, the CUDs, provide opportunities for individuals who do not have access to the tools to gain access to the tools. And you can do that far more effectively, efficiently, and fairly if you are providing them an opportunity to go to a library or a town hall to connect online to that meeting, rather than arbitrarily choosing a town that is 2.5-hour drive away for them to attend in person. So we think we qualify under undue hardship, but we don't know. And we don't know if we need an exemption, or we don't know if we need to claim this before we decide not to have a hybrid meeting and have an only online meeting, or whether that is, or what we have to do to prove, should there be a complaint, that there was no in-person option.
Yeah, I remember this being a notable component of the conversation a couple of years ago, this work.
And can I just say, Chair Byron,
Please.
thank you and the former committee, some members are there, for giving us a 6-month extension to figure it out. We have tried to figure it out, but it's challenging with the volunteer groups that are so widely. So our issue is different from another group's issue, but I can just say that we like online, we record it, we record minutes, but having a hybrid option, an in-person option, is an undue hardship. We just don't know if we qualify under the law, and we would like to confirm that.
No, I've heard from members of your organization directly as well. So what you're saying to the group is been put in front of me already. So
Thank you for your consideration.
we understand where your position was. Yeah. So any questions for Mr. Cotta? No? All right. Bob's pointing.
So
So with this, I think what I want to do is take some of these suggestions, and once we have an opportunity to discuss with council, who is watching remotely and following along but not here with us, to discuss what some of these suggestions and offerings can look like, if that makes sense for everyone. And maybe not necessarily like do anything to adjust the language within the bill in a new draft, but start to get an understanding of what these requests could and would look like. So we can start assessing unintended consequences of revenue choice, right? Because that's always one of the catches when we're doing work with this subject matter. You know, those of you who were here last biennium, we did a lot of work on this. There were a couple of things that we thought we might have to address. Some of that's coming up now, you know. And also the concerns around the Zoom bombing and whatnot. I had a very lived experience with that one, not Ferris, but the town meeting that. So that was something I also wanted to chit chat about. That was like indirectly addressed here with the storage, but I also wanted to have a conversation with council about some of those access scenarios when you're doing hybrid with public meetings, because we've seen multiple pornographic and distasteful theories popping up.
They hit Bennington County hard, Paul.
So that's another piece that I wanted to like also flag for council, though, like to see if we could figure out some kind of policy solve for it. Any comment or discussion on this for right now? We did a ton of work over the last couple of weeks, so I want to be mindful of that and mindful of everyone needing a little R&R because things will pick up sooner than we know it. So barring any other comment or discussion, we'll conclude for the day and just spend some time doing constituent work, emails, or any of the other work on the bills you may have been assigned